Many who are first will be last. Many who are last will be first. This is supremely true of the west of Ireland in 1879. Misery, utter misery. A very large number of people dying at an early age, famine and all its accompanying evils. Given the large number of souls that weren't being prayed for sufficiently, Archdeacon Kavanagh took on himself 100 consecutive Holy Masses for the Holy Souls without stipends. And things happened. At the elevation at the last one, a little girl who was deaf and dumb began to praise God and to speak. And the Queen of Heaven came. She did not say anything, but her presence said it all. It rained for 2 hours, and she was there as the Queen of Ireland, just close to her suffering common people, all ages, great and small. But she was not alone. She is the Queen of Angels, and the only moving part of the strange 2-hour-long vision were the angels. They were not going around her, but they were going around the altar. And this very year, Knock has been proclaimed a Eucharistic shrine. On the altar was the Lamb, slain but glorified. It was precisely in relation to the power of the Holy Mass. That would make sense in the context. And over it was this cross, a big black cross. The Carthusians have this in their motto, Crux stat, dum volvitur orbis. The cross stands while the world goes round. And that also is a message. Our pain is hard. And at Fatima, she gave that message to the little children, not that much time later on, in 1916 and 17 essentially. But already in 1916 there was something very similar with that angel giving communion and teaching them how to adore. But they were taught to make sacrifice and to offer up. That applies to us, for we all have matter for sacrifice. Rather than complain, let us do as the Queen of Heaven teaches us, uniting it precisely to the ongoing sacrifice, for all over the earth it is offered all the time. Calvary is made present until the end of time on our altars. The power of the cross never ends. The redemption still applies itself to the living and the dead. The frontier actually is very thin. But there is also the presence of the Word, insofar as the only one apparently speaking but not heard is John the Evangelist, as a teacher, as a preacher, with the book of the Gospel in his hand, a bishop. The authority of the Church is there. And all celebrations of that holy sacrifice should be linked with the bishop and with the bishop's name. We need obedience, and we need the mandate to have the full blessing of heaven. And then, quietly, with an interiority which is his, St. Joseph, in prayer mode, just with his blessed spouse and his adopted son, Jesus Christ, our Saviour. He is also, right now, in a very glorious place in the Church's mind, and we need to use the fact that this year is dedicated to St. Joseph. He is aware of the problems of the Church and our own, and he is more powerful than we can imagine, given his proximity to the Holy Child. That has never changed, and he has power over his heart. The child Jesus remembers Daddy. In 1991, when I had met the Abbot of Kilnacrot, he sent me to stay for a while at the Abbey. I just finished theology at Bangor, and then he suggested my staying a second week. And he sent me to Knock on a pilgrimage. He came and appeared and gave me some money to buy myself a cup of tea, and he promised to pick me up at nearby Kilmarnock on the way back. He was very wise. He just exposed me to a powerful place at a powerful time. And Our Lady, in that powerful place at that powerful time, again, without a word, did something and said something. It happened to be the weekend of the pilgrimage of Padre Pio. There were 12,000 people there from all over Ireland. And on the bus and in the place all day I felt the heart of ancient Erin beating strong. There was faith in this Emerald Isle, and I wanted to be a part of it. It was a turning point. I will stay in this land. It is Our Lady's, Queen of Ireland. And then, as it happens, I was given material to read there about purgatory. I saw that this place also has a deep faith. And all these people from all over Ireland had one thing in common: this simple ancient faith, strong as ever in the early 90s. I could see all the churches on the way and on the way back, all with the same faith that they had fought for so long. In all kinds of circumstances. We have, for instance, the poor people in the Mass. They're celebrating quietly, trying to keep away from the attention of the authorities. Life was simple in those days. There was great poverty, but actually in that poverty there was a huge spiritual richness. Now the balance has shifted. Material ease has come in and the spiritual wealth has gone down. One thinks, for instance, of what's happened to the travelling community. They still have the faith, but money has come in from strange places in some circumstances, and we know where. It's not fair that people should use these people for their own ends, especially in the drug scene. Leave our young people alone. Let them have the faith of their fathers. Don't bring in other things from other cultures. Don't expose them to all that's out there on the internet and on the television. In Ireland, before all this came in their poverty, they held on with all they could to the chain that binds us to heaven in our families, the Holy Rosary, said all over these poor cottages throughout the land every evening. They would use the chairs as their kneelers, that is, they would kneel on the ground and put their arms on the chairs to kneel and put their weight upon. All were there. It was a quiet time, and of course it was easier before the television made other noises in the hearth. How can we compete with the pulpit of Satan? That, by the way, was the point at which it became difficult. Even though initially television wasn't pornographic or anything of the nature, it was there, and it was a noise and it was an opening to another culture, another mode of thought. On the contrary, Our Lady was silent, and the Lamb was the centre of that silence, adored by angels. And Our Lady with the angels would say the same thing to Ireland now. In the house of God, be silent and worship the Lamb. Indeed, it was to a little child, the youngest canonized one in the church to date, St. Jacinta of Fatima, who died at the age of 9, that she made known clearly before she died that she did not want people talking in church. And that little Jacinta, when she found that no one was listening, gave the message to the Cardinal Archbishop of Lisbon before she died. It is important that we listen to heaven. For Ireland used to have a huge devotion, physical devotion to the Blessed Sacrament, and now we have made of our churches meeting places for each other. It is well also to arrive in time. We think of the miles and miles that people used to trudge, often in great difficulty under the rain, and sometimes also without even proper footgear, even barefoot. They would find their way to the Holy Sacrifice, cost what it might. I had an example of that some years ago, in modern terms. It was a friend of mine who used to come here regularly. Even though he couldn't drive, he'd bring himself here by a friend's means. And he would walk from the centre of Navan every Sunday to the outskirts, which is a long way from where he was living, to Johnstown. And he would always be there in church before I got there even. He was at the back, at the right, praying on his knees, precisely in silence. He got there on time, before anyone else, and he used the time well. And then he would always come to confession afterwards. It was in the box before the COVID came in, and I would always send him off after his confession while saying goodbye, as he went let himself out of the box. I just say, "Ray, you're great. What are you?" And he would look back, with a twinkle in his eye, he'd say, "I'm a child of God." And he'd make off with himself. And in the meantime, do a lot of good. He had received grace from our Blessed Lady in a fulminating way. She who is the one who obtains grace for us, mediatrix of all graces, and she managed to obtain for him, from her Divine Son, this grace of being fully on, and that in a very practical way. He would organise public processions, rosary processions, in the big town of Navan, right in the centre of it. When everything was organised, he would casually call on the Gardaí, the police, and say there will be a procession through Navan on such a day, and they had to follow suit and help to protect it. Afterwards, of course, he knew perfectly well how to organise things in a way that would work. He was very devoted to our Blessed Lady of Knock and to the Holy Rosary itself, because he was organising all these rosary processions, and very much involved with Legion of Mary, which uses the rosary all the time. And on this very day, the feast of Our Lady of Knock, his grandmother, Emily Kane, was on her deathbed in 2018. And as she was petering out. He was right next to her at the bedside, and he was singing in her ear the hymn to Our Lady of Knock, Queen of Ireland, and she passed to the other side as he was singing. In the course of the year that followed, he started to come here, and in fact, immediately after he'd received news, he came here, and we didn't think the news was quite so noisy, but it was. He started to go down quickly, but he was always positive and hoping that Our Lady would give him health again. But she and her son had other ideas for the greater glory of God. His innings was to be short. He was only 39, when on that very same day, as he was preparing to watch the anniversary mass of his dear grandmother, Emily Kane, on the webcam of Navan Church, he himself went into the beyond, and presumably was met there immediately by his dear grandmother, who, as it were, came to look for him. We had his funeral in Navan Church, and it was very much Godward. There was nothing in the way of applause. It was quiet and interiorized. And as they were carrying out the body of our dear friend, the whole church burst out quietly, but interiorly and beautifully, with Our Lady of Knock. The body was quietly going out of the church to meet the Queen of Heaven. And when they put him in the ground, his grandfather Benny launched a little white dove. But after a few flutterings of the wing, it came back to the mound where the body was and wouldn't go away. Ray had a short innings, but he loved Our Lady of Knock, Our Lady of Fatima, and the doves did the same thing at Fatima. They wouldn't leave Our Lady. Our Lady still speaks without words. We are a family, and she takes some little ones home early. But we must all follow, and our riches are not of this world.
There will be one over angels gathered around the throne, all along the moon and the moon, like the children that you call. We are gathered here before you, and our hearts are just the same. Free the joy and the truth I try to find. Here I stand with the truth of vision, and with you surrender your side, and I see the Lamb of God on the altar glorified. Golden rose, Queen of Ireland, oh my cares and the troubles cease, as we kneel with love before you, Lady of Love, my Queen of Peace. And the Lamb will no longer alone in this world will shine her light on everyone. And the Lamb will no longer alone in this world will shine her light on everyone. Golden rose, Queen of Ireland, all my cares and troubles cease, as we kneel, we Lord before you, Lady of Love, my Queen of Peace. Lady of Love, my Queen of